started discussing the Bavli and its take on what happens when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos, but let's go back to the beginning of the Gemara. We read the Mishnah. Let's go back to the beginning of the Gemara. And I want to very carefully read its assumptions, and I want you, I know this is blasphemous, but I want you at different points to challenge the assumptions of the Bavli and tell me what else theoretically could have been suggested by the Bavli, because that'll help us as we try to understand the Yerushalmi. I know it's blasphemous, but I remember once Rav Lichtenstein used to do this to us with, we'd read the Mishnah, and he would say, okay, reading the Mishnah, what are the logical possibilities that emerge? And I remember at some point a new person came into Shir who had just transferred from another yeshiva post Hesder, and someone raised a possibility, and I think even Rav Lichtenstein raised the possibility, and the person said, but that's against the Gemara. Rav Lichtenstein said, yes, it is, but that when you read the Mishnah, you didn't know that yet, right? Meaning, just because in the Mishnah there are multiple possibilities. The Bavli may reject something, but it's a possibility in the Mishnah, and especially in the case that we're going to see, it may be the maskana of the Yerushalmi. So you have to be a little bit, chutzpahdik. I don't know what the right word is, but be willing to raise possibilities that the Gemara explicitly rejects, if you want to understand what moves the Gemara is actually making. Okay, so let's go back to the Gemara on Chavtet Amud Bet, and let's start from the Gemara. Who wants to take it up today? Let's have a brave new reader, someone who has not yet volunteered. Either a brave Shana Aleph guy or a brave Shana Gimel guy. But right now, hi Yeri. But someone be brave and take up the Gemara. We've had a few repeats here. Okay, go ahead.
All right, yeah, I'll take it.
Okay, go ahead.
So, are we starting from the Yerushalmi here?
No, start from the Bavli. Start from the Gemara and the Bavli.
Okay. So start with the Mishnah? Okay.
No, well, we did the Mishnah, but pick up in the Gemara, from Minani Mili.
Okay, Minani Mili. Amar Rebbe Levi bar Lachma, Amar Rebbe Chama bar Chanina. Katuv Echad Omer, it says in a pasuk, written in one pasuk, it says, Shabbaton Zipron Teruah. A Shabbaton, a Shabbos of remembering the Teruah, the flask.
Right. Now this is the description of Rosh Hashanah in Emor.
In Vayikra.
Right, which is Parshat Emor. Right? Vayikra Chav Gimel is Revi or Chamishi already, I think, in Revi or Chamishi in Emor. Right? The Chav Gimel start there in Revi. Yeah?
Right. The Chasuv Echad Omer, and in another pasuk it says, Yom Teruah Yelachka. A day of blasting, it'll be for you. Right? So, just keep going. Okay. So,
right. So the implication the Gemara thinks is that at this stage in the Gemara, the reason the Gemara sees a contradiction is because it thinks that Trua means you actually blow the shofar, and Zichron Trua means you talk about blowing the shofar. Right. So which is it?
Seems like they're not the same thing. Right.
Good. Okay.
So low kasha. It's not a kasha. Kan b'yom tov shachal liyot b'shabbat. Kan b'yom tov shachal liyot b'chol. So here in the first pasuk, it's talking about when Yom Tov it falls out on Shabbat, and here it's talking about when it's a regular day of Yom Tov that falls out during the week.
Okay, good. Now I want to push you on this, all of you, very hard on understanding this line. Okay, the Gemara thinks at this stage that first of all the distinction between blowing the shofar on what the Rosh Hashanah and Shabbat and Rosh Hashanah during Chol is d'oraita, right? That's clear, right? Because it's describing two different types of Rosh Hashanah based on two different psukim. Okay? If you stopped right here, though, tell me why, according to the why is it, right? Don't tell me the answer to the Bavli. Tell me at this stage in the Gemara what you know. Why is Rosh Hashanah that falls on Shabbat one that does not have shofar blowing, and why is Rosh Hashanah that falls during the week that one that does? Right? What do we know at this stage in the Gemara? Yeah, Rami.
So, based on what we know right now, because we have these two sources, and so one of them is referring to a time when we are blowing the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, and one of them times is we're not.
Good. And why not?
Based off the
and why not?
And so our reasons that it's because the laws, the one that's you only remember it is referring to one where it falls on Shabbos.
Very good.
Teaching us that it falls to Shabbos, presumably oversee the Tkiyah Shofar.
Good. So at this stage we know that, but why are they different? Do we know why they're different? We know they're two psukim, but what's the nature of the difference?
No, but we can make an assumption like why he's doing that. Maybe because of Melach on Shabbat.
So Andrew is telling me, is already jumping to the next stage in the Bavli, which is, if there's a difference between Rosh Hashanah and Shabbat and Rosh Hashanah during the week, it must be because there's a problem with blowing the shofar on Shabbat. That isn't, he's right in the Bavli. But at this stage in the Gemara, is that obvious?
No.
No, right? Tell me the logical possibilities where we stand right now, right? Before the Gemara, you made two big assumptions, both of which the Bavli makes, but neither of which are obvious, right? What two assumptions do you just make? That if Shabbat is different from the weekdays because it's Asr on Shabbat, right? Assumption one. And assumption two is
because of Malacha.
The Isser is Malacha. Neither of those are obvious, right? At this stage of the Gemara, you could have said Shabbat is different from the weekday because it's Asr to blow the shofar on Shabbat, but not because of Malacha, right? Meaning there are other Isurim on Shabbat that are not Isser Malacha. For example, so the Gemara, the Bavli has one, the Yerushalmi has two, right? The Bavli, or at least, right? The Bavli has one, which is Mechamer, right? Which is leading an animal on Shabbat, which is Asr Bilav, right? But it's not Malacha. And the Yerushalmi thinks, and the Rambam and the Rif both think, the Bavli agrees, that Tchumen, right? That Isser Tchumen, not the tchum of 2,000 mil, which is the normal tchum we talk about, which everyone agrees is derabanan, but the tchum of Yud Beit mil, right? According to the Bavli, the Bavli says that tchum, right, walking 2,000 amad outside of your house is derabanan, or outside of the city is derabanan. The Yerushalmi says that's true, but if you walk 12 mil, right, which is like 10 miles or something like that, then that's deoraita, right? But it's not a malacha. You're not chayiv misa. It's a lav. Right, it's a regular run-of-the-mill lav, and the Rambam paskins that with the halacha. So Andrew makes two assumptions, which the Bavli makes, right? But neither are obvious, and you could reject one or both of those assumptions, right? And still conclude that you're allowed to blow the shofar during the week and not on Shabbat, right? So one is to say again. Well, let's read it. Andrew's going to take the next line in the Gemara. Right? Which is Rava's position, right? Andrew here is channeling Rava, which is not a bad person to channel. But I want you to understand the assumptions that Rava made, right? What did Rava say? Right? Amar Rava.
He wants me to read the next
one. Yeah, Andrew, why don't you, let Andrew channel Rava, and then we can go back to Yuri. Yeah, so read.
Okay, so where's it?
So Amar Rava here. Amar Rava.
If it's from the Torah, but Mikdash, how do you blow in the Mikdash if it's from the Torah? Because you would be...
So first, right, so statement one of Rava is which assumption? Right, I want you to show how both assumptions of Andrew, Rava articulates, but separately. Assumption one is the only reason that you should not be allowed to blow the shofar on Shabbat is because of an Isser. Right, that's assumption one. Right, and therefore Rava says, but if it's Asr, it should be Asr b'mikdash and Asr outside of the mikdash. Right, imi doraita b'mikdash heichi takina. And if it's Asr, it's Asr, it's Asr. And therefore, it can't be true in or out. The second assumption is that if it's Asr, it must be Asr mishum malacha. You see in the next line. Va'od.
I have a question on that. Isn't in the mikdash, and they have different laws about...
Oh, very good. Very good. You could have answered, what are you talking about? Right, Mapidom. There can be different halacha in the mikdash. Why not? Right? Rava he actually makes three assumptions, but the two that Andrew made and one more, right? The first one is that the only reason that that there should be a difference between Shabbos and the weekday is an Isser, right? Assumption one. Assumption two is if something's Usser, it's Usser in the Mikdash and outside the Mikdash, right? That was the assumption that Andrew didn't say. And assumption three is the next line, which is what Andrew said, which is Va'od.
Oh, and furthermore, halav melacha is not melacha. The itzchaka, the B'nai Pasuk, to exclude this.
Right? Meaning, and he said, right, Rav is saying, if it's Usher, it must be Usher Mishum Malacha, and blowing the shofar is not a Malacha. How does he know?
Yeah.
The Tana de Shmuel.
The Tana de Shmuel, Kol melacha avodah lo tasu. All melacha, all work you shouldn't do. Yistad, this should exclude Tikkat Shofar, V'ridat Hapat, blowing of the shofar, removing of the bread.
Right, that's taking down the bread from the ovens on Shabbat. If you know what this is, okay, it's important that you guys know what this looks like, just to understand what this is. Let me see if I can get you a good picture of it. Let's see. I should be able to. No, come on. Okay, if I can't find it, I can't find it. But Ridiyat Apat basically is the way they had their ovens, right, where they were conical stone ovens, and you would take the bread off the side. You would cook it the way you cook like a pita, right? Not in the oven, but on the oven, right? And taking it off without it losing its shape is not easy, right? That's the point here. Tanur Vikirayim. Why? Okay, for some reason I can't find all the pictures of Talmudic ovens, but okay. It's basically a cone with the head top like lopped off with a fire underneath, and you put it on the side, right? The pitot are baked on the side, and then you pull them off. Okay. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
So about malacha in the Mikdash, what malachas apply? All of them, or only some of them?
So in general, all of those apply, right? So in general, all of them apply, unless those that there are specific reasons to accept them, right? Like those related to the karbanot. But let's right here. I'll put in the chat here the assumptions of the Gemara, and I want you to see how none of these were obvious. Okay, right? So, right, the Gemara first posits, right, a difference between Shabbat and Chol, right? But then Rava makes three very striking assumptions. One is, if there is a biblical difference, right, it must be due to a prohibition, to a lav, right? Two, that prohibition must be at the level of malacha, right? And three, if the difference is due to an Isser, then it must be true in the Mikdash as well. Right? Those are Rava's three assumptions. Right? None of those are obvious. Literally, none of them are obvious. Right? Even on biblical level. Right? Because you could have argued on any of these points. Right? You could have said, let's start with the easiest here, number 2. Right? You could have said, yes, the difference between the Mikdash and outside the Mikdash is in Isser. But why do you assume that it has to be a Malacha? Maybe it's just an Isser. Right? Maybe the difference is the level of a Lav. So sure, blowing the shofar is not a Malacha. But it's Usser. Right? you could have argued on number one and said, wait a second, why does the difference have to be generated by an Isser at all? Right? Why does it have to be generated by an Isser at all? What else might generate a difference? So let me give you an example that should push you towards what I'm getting at. Right? If I tell you the following, on Tetvav's Tishrei, I take a lulav, and on Tetvav Nisan, I don't take a lulav, but I take matzah. Right? And now I ask you, why are those different? What are you going to tell me? Why are they different? It's not a trick question, right?
One of those fulfillments and the other one doesn't.
Yeah, and what are those 2 days? One is called the first day of Sukkot, the other is called the first day of Pesach. They're just different holidays, right? The differences aren't because of Isurim, it's because of their identity, right? One is Sukkot, so it has mitzvot. One is Pesach, so it is different mitzvot. They're just different, right? Think about what the Gemara is doing here. The Gemara is claiming that there are two different psukim, one of which refers to Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos, and one of which refers to Rosh Hashanah not on Shabbos. You could have said that the difference between Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos and not Shabbos is not because it's usher to blow the shofar on Shabbos, but because what? The Gemara is positing that they're different holidays. Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos is a unique creation called Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos, and the way that you celebrate it is with tefillah about shofar. And Rosh Hashanah that falls during the week is a holiday that is celebrated with Kiyat Shofar. This has nothing to do with Isser at all. It has to do with mitzvot. Right? And you could have said that pretty easily because you have two psukim which describe these two holidays differently. Right? There was no reason to jump to Isser. It could have been that the difference is that they have different mitzvot, just like Pesach and Sukkot. Right?
Are you saying that Shabbat affects how you celebrate Rosh Hashanah, or Rosh Hashanah is different? Rosh Hashanah itself is different ways of itself is different whether it's on Shabbat day.
I would say you could say both, but I would say the second one sounds to me, even though it's more radical, a fair read of the psukim according to this stage of the Bavli. Right? If you think that the Torah actually describes Rosh Hashanah in two different ways, a Yom Trua and a Yom Zichron Trua, right? That's what the Gemara is saying, right? That there's a Rosh Hashanah called Yom Trua, and there's a different holiday called Rosh Hashanah Shechal B'Yom Shabbat, which is called Yom Zichron Trua, right?
But following that logic, why is Rosh Hashanah different than any other holiday that Shabbos synthesizes with it and creates a new holiday instead of just coexisting?
Good.
Or
And what Yehonatan is saying might be exactly why the Bavli didn't want to go in this direction, right? Which is, that's very nice, but why would that be true? What I want to do is not argue that these assumptions are correct. I want to point out to you that the Bavli made three radical assumptions, which may all be justified, but none of them are noticed. Rashi's Chiddush and is not at all happy. Right? And the Ramban says, first of all, right, once you're saying that the Torah itself mandates the saying of psukim, then why did you only mention zichronot and shofarot? Right? There are three psukim you say, malchiot, zichronot, and shofarot. Three sets of psukim, malchiot, zichronot, and shofarot. Okay, that's his first problem. But then he says worse, right? This is really the key. These 5 words is, the Ramban says, what are you talking about? Aval kol ze asmachta midivreihem. How are you solving the problem by saying that the pasuk tells you that you have to blow the shofar and say psukim on Shabbos? On Rosh Hashanah always. the psukim are dirabanan. Saying, not the psukim are from the Torah. Saying the psukim, sorry, on Russian, that was a mistake. Saying the psukim is only dirabanan. Right? So, what are you doing? You're interpreting the pasuk as you have to say psukim Rosh Hashanah, but no, you don't. Not biblically, you don't. So you can't interpret the pasuk in a dirabanan way. That's crazy. So, and he proves it from the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah on Lamed Daled. The Ramban says, "I'll prove it to you." Umifurash Amru, the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah Lamed Daled tells you, "Holchen lamakom shetokin, ve'en holchen lamakom shemivarchin." That if you have a choice between going to a place where they're blowing the shofar or a place where they're davening and saying the psukim, you can only do one. So the Gemara says you go to the place where you blow the shofar. Why? Pshita, hadoraita v'hadirabanan. Right? Because one is biblical and one is rabbinic. Lo tzricha. So the Gemara answered, the Gemara says, okay, it's a case where you know you'll be able to daven, you're not sure if you'll be able to blow shofar, and then it's not obvious that you go to the Safek Daraita over the Vadei Darabanan, and that's the Chiddush of the Gemara. But he says, the Gemara tells you explicitly that saying the Psukim is only Darabanan. So therefore he says, Avol Zichron Trua Kimo, Yom Trua Yelachem, Yomar Shinari B'Yom Hazeh V'Yanu L'Zikaron L'Fnei Hashem. So he says, no, you got it wrong. You know what Zichron Trua means? As follows. Yom Trua means blow the shofar. And what does Zichron Trua mean? When you blow the shofar, God will remember you. It's not you will make it a Zichron, it's God, right, will remember you. Remember the bracha of Zichronot? Right? Shetaleh Zichronenu Lefanecha. Right? So the Ramban says, no. Rosh Hashanah is both Yom Trua and Yom Zichron Trua. It's Yom Trua because you got to blow the shofar. It's Yom Zichron Trua because when you blow the shofar, God will remember you through the blowing of the shofar. So it's both a Yom Trua and a Yom Zichron Trua. But he rejects Rashi alapanim. Right? He just says, what are you talking about? Rashi's just wrong. Right? Saying the psukim is not biblical. Maybe we'll come back to defend Rashi later, because you can defend Rashi, right? There is a way of defending Rashi. But, Yonatan, what do you think? Does the Ramban solve the maskana of the Bavli without creating the problems of Rashi?
It seems like he does, but at the same time, it's questionable to me what Zichron, meaning God will remember you, means. Like, what does it mean for God to remember you?
Right, so he says it's the same as, right? He says it's the same as the pasuk in, right? Meaning he has a good proof, which is a pasuk, right? Which is...
Then why is it necessary to say
here, right? Here's his proof. Just 1 second, just look at his proof, because the Ramban didn't make it up, right? Bamidbar Yod Yod. Uveyom simchatchem uvemoadechem uvrashei chadshechem utkatem bechatzotzot al olotechem val zivchei shamechem vayu lachem lezikaron lifnei Elohechem ani Adonai Elohechem. Right? On your holidays and your Moadim and Rosh Chodesh, you'll blow the shofar when you bring korbanot, and it will be a remembrance for you before God. Right? I am Hashem, your God. Right? So Ramban doesn't make it up. Now, what it means that we're being remembered by God is a very good theological question. But just in reading the pasuk, he has a pretty good proof. It's called Bamidbar Yod Yod, right? Meaning it's a pretty good proof that Zikaron isn't something you do; it's something that happens because of what you do, right? And therefore, the Ramban just says Yom Trua means blow the shofar. Zichron Trua means when you blow the shofar, God will remember you, whatever that means, right? Whatever it means that God will remember you, God will, right? By doing the mitzvot, so God will. Right? The schuyot of you doing the mitzvah means that God will pay attention to you, whatever that means. Okay? Right? We can have a theological discussion about what that means, but whatever it means, it means. Okay? If you go through the Mefarshim, you'll find that there'll be many different interpretations of Zichron Trua, but the Ramban and Rashi, as you see, are both, in their own ways, saying that the Havamina of the Bavli is that Yom Trua and Zichron Trua is either or, And the maskana is both. For Rashi, it means blow the shofar and say psukim. Chiddush of Rashi, saying psukim is deoraita. Not obvious at all. Seems to go against the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah Daf Lamed Dalet. Ramban says Yom Trua is what you do. You blow the shofar. Zichron Trua is the result of you blowing the shofar. Yeah, Ezra.
Two things. One, what's the point? Why would it say Zichron Trua if it's telling you that like God remember you? It says it somewhere else in Bamidbar. Like, what's
So
the
that's
point
not talking about Rosh Hashanah, right? That's a generic statement of the blowing the shofar that happened in the Mikdash more generally.
Okay.
Right? The Ramban is just using it as a cognate. Right? He's saying the same thing that happens there happens here. But they're... Oh, this is trippy. Now I'm seeing Rami and Yaakov's screen, and before he was in his own. Oh, it's... Look at the benefits of Zoom. Yes, okay, yeah.
Also, could you say that it's like, it's not right to say the psukim, but it's like an asmachta?
Well, that's what the Ramban says. It's an asmachta. The problem is if it's only an asmachta, then you need to explain the pshat. Right? Meaning, the Ramban says, yes, it's the... You need some other interpretation. Right? The problem is that the Bavli started by saying there must be a biblical interpretation to Trua and Zichron Trua. If your interpretation is only an asmachta, that means that that's not what it really means. I'll be pshat. You need to come up with a pshat interpretation in order to explain it away.
Okay, but even according to the definition, like the definition of an asmachta, that it's not just the like rabbis using this as a like memory device. It's like God hinting at you that this is what you should do, but you're not required to.
Very good. And who says that? Whose solution is that? The Ritva.
Rambam or no?
The Ritva.
Oh, Ritva.
The Ritva on the sugya in Rosh Hashanah Tet Zayin says what you said, which is, no, a smachta is not what you think it is. A smachta is not just a hint. A smachta means God actually programmed it into the Torah. He just didn't obligate you to do it. I wasn't sure if I was going to get into the Ritva, but yes, Ezra, you are 100% correct that this is a good time to pull out the Ritva and say, aha, you only have a problem if you think a smachta means this is totally not pshat. It's only a nice mnemonic to help you remember rabbinic law. But if you think a smachta is quasi-biblical, then yes, you could solve the problem by saying you're right. Saying the psukim is not deoraisa, but it's not derabanan either. It's a smachta, and therefore, it is hinted at in the pasuk. Yes, you are correct. You could, if you wanted to, solve this with the Ritva. And this is indeed the locus classicus for that discussion of the Ritva. Not the Sugyan Lamed Dalet, but the Sugyan Tet Zayin. Yes, Yonatan.
Building up Ezra's first question, even though the pasuk in Bamidbar refers to not just Rosh Hashanah, but all of these times when we blow the shofar, why does that solve the issue of having two psukim for that? I mean, doesn't that still refer to Rosh Hashanah? Why do we need to specify Rosh Hashanah as a time when we will be remembered, according to the Rambam?
Well, presumably because on Rosh Hashanah there's a unique obligation, right? There's a unique obligation, and then once you're doing the shofar, it'll do what it does every other time also, but there is a unique obligation. But you are correct that it's going to be important, and maybe we'll stop with this. Let's look at that pasuk one more time. Let's look at that pasuk one more time. Okay? The context of that is, right? It's really talking about war, right? When you go to war, you'll be remembered before God, and when your holidays, when you blow the chatzotzrot. Oh, okay. The simplest answer is that that's not talking about the shofar, it's also talking about the chatzotzrot, right, which are a different instrument, right? That's talking about the mitzvah of the chatzotzrot. Rosh Hashanah, it's a mitzvah of shofar, not chatzotzrot, right? And both of them accomplish the same thing. So that's the easy answer, right? There's a special mitzvah in Rosh Hashanah, blow the shofar, and not just the trumpets, right? But there is something else here which is important, which is this. It's always done in conjunction with what? Karbanot. Very good. It's always done in conjunction with karbanot. What might that hint at?
The Mikdash?
Yeah, it might hint at, let's be more specific, that what? that there's a special halacha of shofar in the context of karbanot. And look back at our three assumptions from the Bavli, right? Assumption 3. If the difference, right, if there's a difference between Mikdash and Gvulin, it has to do, right? The Bavli said there can be no difference between Mikdash and Gvulin. But Andrew said, why not? Now give me a good reason to tell me why there should be a difference between Mikdash and Gvulin. Is that there seems to be an intimate connection between blowing the shofar and karbanot. If there's a connection between shofar and karbanot, suddenly there might be a difference between Mikdash and Gvulin that has nothing to do with Isurin, right? But might have to do with the different identity of the Mikdash and outside the Mikdash. Now, this is where I'll leave you for tomorrow. As you look at the Yerushalmi, it is not clear to me that even though many people present it this way, it's not clear at all that the Yerushalmi is simply the straw men rejected by the Bavli. Because the Yerushalmi is not surprisingly going to invoke a pasuk from Karbanot, right? Which is already going to hint to the possibility that the Yerushalmi does not believe like the Bavli's Havamina, right? There's no reason to believe that the Yerushalmi automatically thinks that if it's usher to blow the shofar on Shabbat, that's because it's a malacha. It might. The Yerushalmi might just be the rejected Havamina of the Bavli, but literally the Yerushalmi just has to reject any other assumption of the Bavli to construct a different conceptual world. And therefore, when you look at the Yerushalmi, possibilities are: the Yerushalmi believes that blowing the shofar is not a malacha. And therefore, the Yerushalmi thinks it's usher to blow the shofar in Midoraisa on Shabbos. Either one, because it's a malacha, but it thinks that it's mutter in the mikdash anyways. Or 2, no, it agrees with the Bavli that blowing the shofar is not a malacha, but it doesn't think that the only isser that exists is an isser malacha. It could be an isser lav. Or possibility 3. It thinks that the reason you blow the shofar in the Mikdash and not in the Gvulin has nothing to do with Yisurim at all. It has to do with the different identity of Mikdash versus Gvulin, which might hang on the intimate connection, the conceptual connection between shofar blowing and karbanot, which expresses itself obviously different in the Mikdash and Gvulin. And this goes back to Yehonatan's point that he WhatsApped me before, which is the drasha and the Yerushalmi. There's one type of shofar you blow outside the Mikdash, and one that you blow in the Mikdash. That drasha in the Yerushalmi seems to be very Mikdash focused. But when you look at the pasuk, there's good reason to think that shofar in Rosh Hashanah is Mikdash focused, because shofar is connected to Karbanot. So what I want you to do is read the Yerushalmi. If you've already read the Yerushalmi, so make sure, now that you've seen all the possibilities in the Yerushalmi, stake out a position on which one you think the Yerushalmi is actually saying. Right? If you decide that Yerushalmi is the rejected Havamina and the Bavli, then prove it to me from the language. If you think it's not, support each position from the language. The Yerushalmi is not 100% clear, but there are indications in the Yerushalmi of each of these possibilities. How are you guys doing on sources? Do you need me to give you more sources, or are you going to be okay breaking your teeth over the Yerushalmi and fitting these assumptions back in? Okay. For tomorrow, make sure you know the Yerushalmi well. Make sure you see Shulchan Aruch, because what I want you to see is that despite the fact that we paskin like the Bavli, we have a surprising halacha that seems to not be very Bavli-esque, that we paskin like, that I put in Shulchan Aruch, which is the language of tefillah on Rosh Hashanah, Shechal Yot B'Shabbat, and Rosh Hashanah on Chol. So see that in Shulchan Aruch, which I know I gave you on this source sheet. And let me see. Yeah, and then at the end, right, I gave you a bunch of questions. You can decide which ones you want to take up. I I already have like the next few source sheets ready, but I didn't want to overwhelm you. I'll keep them as separate sheets. Obviously, the next thing we have to deal with is Yehonathan's question from before is how the heck did the rabbis tell you not to do a mitzvah d'oraita? And once you establish that the rabbis are allowed to do that, you got to ask the next question, which is once the rabbis have the power to get rid of d'oraitas, why don't they do it all the time? Right? Because not every mitzvah on Shabbos do we get rid of. Right? Like bris milah stays on Shabbos. Why? Right? If a bris is on Shabbos, we let you do it on Shabbos. Why? You might carry the knife. Right? Why don't we do it to every mitzvah? Another question that we have to deal with, again, we may not get to all of these questions. One question I do want to make sure that you get to is, which I think is also fascinating, is let's say you don't listen to the rabbis. Let's say you blow the shofar on Shabbos. Now what? Did you fulfill a mitzvah? Yes or no?
Probably not.
Oh, good. It's a machloket achronim. So, if you want, we can deal with that question. It's a machlokas. It's for the first. The question is first directly posed by Rabbi Kiva Eger on this sugya, but it's raised in other by Rishonim and other sugyot. So, for example, Rabbeinu Yonah asked the question on what if you say Kriyat Shema after Chatzot, right? Same question. The rabbi said, "Don't do it." Does that mean you don't fulfill the mitzvah? That's a very important question. I want to deal with that question. I'm already over time, so tell me which ones you want me to give you sources on. Which of those questions do you want to deal with next?
Definitely the one with what happens if you blow the shofar.
Okay, fine. So I'll try to limit you because these are more achronim, but I'll give you the Mishnah in the first Mishnah in Brachot, Rabbeinu Yonah. You don't have to remember this, I'll send it to you, but I'll give you the first Mishnah in Brachot, Rabbeinu Yonah on the Rif there, Tosfot in Sukkah Daf Gimel, and I'll give you the Tshuvot Rabbi Kiva Eger, and maybe the Avnei Nezer. I think that's what I'll give you, okay? So I'll try to send that out then for tomorrow, but first make sure you know the Yerushalmi, if you've already finished the sources, so then you can continue on to the sources that I'll send next, okay? For guys who want Piskei Corona, I'll pick up at 12:15. Okay. I'll leave my meeting room on, but you guys are obviously free to disappear.